Majority of the fabrics available in the market are produced by weaving process. Weaving is the making is a process the fabrics by use of a minimum of 2 sets of yarns, namely the warp and the weft yarns. The ways in which the warp and weft interlace with each other change the appearance of the fabric and also change the characteristics of the fabrics. All woven fabrics are produced with 3 types of basic interlacements, and accordingly all these weaves are called as basic weaves or the fundamental weaves. And these weaves are, the first one is the plain weave, which is very simplest, and second is the twill weave, and the third one is the satin weave. These 3 basic weaves can be made on a simple loom without any special attachments. Type of interlacement how it should come is usually plotted on a graph paper in order to help the weaver, and this graph paper is called as point paper design or weave diagram. Plain weave and its variations. Plain weave is the simplest of all the weaves, and it is sometimes referred as homespun or a tabby weave. Here the interlacement is very simple. Now, the first filling yarn goes over and under one warp yarn, and when the second filling goes, it goes under the first warp yarn where it has gone over in the first instance, and thus across the fabric they will be going over and under the one warp yarn, and thus the fabric is being made here. And it is something, it is resembles like a checkboard and having one filling yarn going over and under one warp yarn, and thus it is a very simple form of producing a fabric. And in this very inexpensive, because only 2 harnesses are being used here, and so this is mainly used for cotton fabrics in order to produce inexpensive cottons. Then coming to the characteristics of this particular plain weave, it has no right and wrong sides, and the same thing no up and down also, because even if you turn it towards wrong side or the right side, it is same. There will not be any difference because there is no design on this particular thing. That is why it looks the same, and that is why this is not having any design surface, and so it becomes uninteresting. But this uninteresting surface becomes an interesting surface in order to produce printing or any surface ornamentation or even finishing in order to get some designs on the material. Thread count is more in this, then the fabric is going to be very strong, but if the thread count is less, the fabric is not going to be that strong. But here we find that the plain weave facilitates more number of interlacements. That means at each and every point we have seen one by one, and at each and every point we find that there is an interlacement, and this interlacement maximum in case of plain weave when compared to other 2 basic weaves. And when these interlacements are more in number, and it will not facilitate more pliability here, and so what happens is this particular material, when you bend it, it wrinkles more, and also but it shrinks less, because at each interlacement the yarns are going over and under, and so even the fabric swells in water and it has no space in order to shrink, and thus this particular thing will not shrink much, and also we may not absorb more water also because of the less space that is present. The variation in plain weave we can bring out by different ways. One is that we use different thread counts, that means more number of yarns, the different fiber content in the yarns of different sizes, having novelty or textured yarns having contrast colors will be able to produce even variety with these things, and then the yarns with high and low twist, and also we can combine this high and low twist either in the warp or in the weft, or in the warp as well as in the weft. And also by spacing of the yarns, we can leave the space in between, and then we can have another yarn over there. That also produces a lot of variety here, and also with the different types of prints and also different types of finishes. We will be able to bring out variety by having these variations in the plain weave. 2 other variations are also possible here. One is rib weave and the other one is the basket weave. This depends upon the thickness of the yarns that are used, and also the more number of yarns are used as a single yarn. And the fabrics woven in plain weave or gingham, voile, lawn, cambric, calico, cheesecloth, chintz, mustard sheeting, organdy, canvas, taffeta, organza, georgette, chiffon, seersucker, long cloth, shirting and dressing materials, all are woven in plain weave. Then coming to the sheer or lightweight fabrics, we have lawn, organdy, chiffon, georgette, cheesecloth, and tissue cloth. It's a gingham, voiles, and organza. These all come under the sheer materials. And if you take the medium weight fabrics, the one which is used for the print cloth, percale, calico, chintz, glazed chintz, suiting materials, muslin, long cloth, shirting material, seersucker, and gingham and taffeta. These are the materials of having medium weight. And when we take the suiting weight fabrics, that means heavy fabrics, we find cotton suiting material and the casement material, and also canvas and tweed and such kinds of materials. Then coming to the ribbed weave. The ribbed weave is dependent upon the thickness of the yarns that are being used. When the number and the size of the yarns differ, it produces a ribbed or corded effects in plain weave fabrics. So, these ribbed or corded effects are produced by in the warp or filling by varying the size of the yarn, maybe fine yarn with thicker yarns, and also or otherwise single yarn with a double yarn. We will be able to produce this kind of ribbed effects by varying the number as well as the size of the yarns. Many rib fabrics are produced by having a heavy filling and also more number of warp yarns. What happens is the weft yarn is thicker and more number of warp yarns which are thin are present over there. It forms a corded effect at that. So, the corded effect is seen towards the filling and not towards the warp yarns. So, this happens with a size, or it may be the use of 2 yarns, double yarns instead of single yarns, and we have khadi suitings and also dimity or examples for this kind of materials. In this particular ribbed effect, the weft yarn which is used will be thick, maybe it is made out of spun yarn and also given very less twist. So, when these loosely twisted yarns are used, the fabric is not going to be that strong, but when the fabric does not require much strength, for the sake of getting variations, sometimes ribbed fabrics are being used. And so, even the weft yarn is not that strong, that will be okay, but if you want to get stronger fabrics in this, it is always better if the weft yarn is completely covered by the finer warp yarns, then the fabric is going to be very strong and it has a better abrasion when compared to the other fabrics. Ribbed fabrics are reversible, because both the sides is going to be the similar, and unless the thread count is very less, otherwise there will not be any up and down or no wrong and right sides for this material. And these materials, because they have an interesting surface, usually they are not printed. If they are printed, then it may have the fabric when up and down as well as right and wrong sides. And the fabrics available in ribbed weave, the very popular one is the poplin, which is used for most of our apparels. And also we have a taffeta material, faili, and also dimity and corded madras shirting, khadi shirting, and bengalin, ottoman, broadcloth, and such other fabrics which are available. Mostly they are also seen in furnishing materials. These ribbed fabrics are seen in that. Then coming to the basket weave. Basket weave is a second variation of the plain weave, in which the yarns are, instead of using a single yarn in plain weave, the more than one yarn is being used, and so more than 2 yarns will go over and under 2 or more than 2 warp yarns, and thus it becomes something like a basket weave. So, because when it goes one by one only, in a single yarn it will not be seen, but if a group of yarns, maybe 2 or more number of yarns go over and under, it gives a basket effect, and so that is why the name of the basket weave for this particular weave. Many number of possibilities are there in this, maybe either it may be 2 by 2 or 3 by 3 or 4 by 4 also is possible. Sometimes both the yarns may not be same, maybe 2 yarns will be going over and under 3 warp yarns, or 3 filling yarns will be going over and under 2 warp yarns. So, in this case maybe 2 by 3 or 3 by 5 or 2 by 1, this is also possible in case of this basket weave. So, basket weave fabrics are very pliable because less number of interlacement that are present here, and sometimes it is used for the self edges of the sheeting materials, because it is going to be little broader when compared to other fabrics. The basket weave produces fabrics which are attractive, and they do not require much of ornamentation on the top, but the weave is produced is not that durable, and because slippage occurs in this, and also there is a possibility of shrinkage in these materials. And so, these fabrics are not usually printed, or not much of ornamentation is done, because as it is it has a very good surface, very interesting surface, and if you want to produce some more interesting surface in this, maybe the yarns of different colors can be used in basket weave. Some of the basket weave fabrics which are available in the market are Oxford shirting, matty cloth, and estate shark skin and things like that. Twill weave and its variations. It is the second basic weave which is very strong when compared to the plain weave. It is characterized by having diagonal lines which are called veils on the surface of the fabric, and this is due to the presence of the floats. A float is a portion of the yarn which will miss the interlacement and go over 2 or 3 yarns and then get interlaced, and so this portion of the yarn that misses the interlacement is called as the float. And twill weave is one in which each filling yarn floats across 2 or more warp yarns with a progression of interlacement by 1 either to the left or to the right, and thus distinct lines are possible. For example, when we take a simple twill weave, the first filling yarn goes over the first warp yarn and then under the 2 warp yarn, second and third warp yarns, and it goes over the fourth warp yarn, and then it again goes under fifth and sixth, and thus across the fabric the interlacement happens like this. And then coming to the second filling yarn, the second weft yarn goes under the first and second warp yarns and over the third warp yarn, and again under 4 and 5, and so on. Like this, you find that the interlacement point is changing by 1 point at the interlacement point, and thus the diagonal lines are possible to get along with the floats. Coming to the characteristics of the twill weave, and you find that it is characterized by having diagonal lines called as veils, and it has no up and down, but there is right and wrong sides unless it is made out of even twill. So, there is right side and the wrong side in this material, but there is no up and down for these materials, because if the diagonals occur on the warp and on the right side it is by the warp, maybe on the wrong side it is by the weft yarns, and so there is a right and wrong side, but there is no up and down unless it is printed or something happens to these materials. The direction of the veil also changes when reversed. It may be the direction in the V shape it can come up, because at one point the direction of the twill changes and it takes a reverse direction, and thus there is a possibility of getting the variation. And sheer fabrics are not usually made in twill weave because it facilitates package of more number of yarns in this. So, sheer fabrics are not generally made in this. And then printing is also not done because twill weave fabrics are having an interesting line, and so this is not being spoiled by having the printing over there. And then these twill weaves differ the number of picks and ends that are present in the fiber, in the fabric. If the more number of yarns are present, then the veils differ in its angle, and thus we bring about variations in this particular thing. And the simplest twill weave, you find that it requires 3 harnesses. So, 1 over and under 2, 1 over and under 2, 2 over and under 1, like that it will be taken, and so 3 harnesses are required for this twill weave. And here there are very few interlacements that are present, and so it makes it more pliable, and also it permits more thread count in this case, and thus the material will be strong enough, and also it has the pliability and wrinkle recovery characteristics, because wrinkle recovery happens when the fabric bends. When the fabric bends, what happens is that the yarns present in the form of floats on the surface, and so they also bend accordingly, and thus they avoid the formation of the wrinkles, and so there is a pliability also in this particular thing. Thus, when we make it more stronger by having more number of yarns in this particular thing. And also the yarns are too many in number, usually the fabric does not show much soil on the surface, and thus the cleanliness of the fabric is easier to maintain. And maybe these fabrics, twill fabrics, are also costly when compared to the plain weave fabrics, because of the process. There are more number of harnesses present, and so this becomes a costly affair when compared to the plain weave fabrics. The twill weave is valued much for its strength, firmness, and the drapability. Then coming to the variations in twill weave, there are a lot of variations that are possible here, and by having the prominence of the weave, the direction of the line, changing the direction of the line, changing the number of yarns that are used, and also the direction of the diagonal lines in the fabric. Now, the first one is the prominence. We take the prominence of the the veils into consideration. We can make it more prominent or less prominent. If we want to make it more prominent, it is possible to use little thicker yarns or some carded yarns, and otherwise if you want to make it very fine, finer combed yarns can be used, and also double yarns can be used, or ply yarns can be used in order to make this twill line being prominent. Thus you can bring variations in this twill weave. And then twill weave, this is changing the direction of the twill, we can also bring variations. Like it may be sometimes we see that the line starts from the left top, and then it progresses into the right bottom, or it may start on the right top and it progresses to the left bottom. And thus when it starts from the left top and when it progresses towards the right bottom, we call it as a left hand twill, and when the direction is reversed, that means that when the direction is from the right top to the left bottom, we call it as a right hand twill weave. Usually cotton fabrics or left hand twill weave fabrics, and whereas wool fabrics are generally right hand twill weaves. So, twill weave fabrics can also be changed as per the degree of angle of the this particular veil or the diagonal line. If more number of threads are packed into this, you find that the twill line becomes very steep, and if the thread count comes down, that means in the number of yarns, that means the difference between the warp and weft is great, then you find it becomes steeper, the line becomes steeper. And if the number of yarns that are used in this warp and weft, if the count is less, then it may be something like medium, you find that it may form around 45 degrees. And if the thread count is too less, then maybe the particular thing will be the veils will become lesser than 45 degrees angle. And accordingly, if the angle is above 45 degrees, then we call it as a steep twill. If it makes a 45 degrees angle, it is called as a normal or regular twill, and if it makes less than 45 degrees angle, then it is called as reclined twill weave. Reclined twill weaves are not that stronger when compared to the steep and also the regular twills. regular twill or the most wanted type of twill weave. Unless much strength is required, they will be going only for the regular twill and not for the steep twill or the reclining twill. And also we can divide them into again having the number of yarns, either even number of yarns are used or odd number of yarns are used. So, accordingly we can divide or we can vary them as a even twills and uneven twills. In even twills, what happens is that the weft yarn will be going over and under the same number of yarns, maybe around over 2 and under 1, over 2 and under 1. And then again when it goes, the interlacement point changes again just 1 at the place of interlacement, either to the right or to the left, forming either left or right twills. But here we find in the even twill that it is going over 2, under 2, and again the second one also will go over 2 and under 2, and thus it forms an even twill. Even when you reverse it, you find the same kind of material, and so even twills are reversible. But when it comes to uneven twills, that means that one yarn goes over 1 under 2 or over 2 under 1 like that, and thus it will not go on the same equal number of yarns. And so when uneven twill, in case if the weft yarn goes over more number of warp yarns than under, then we call it as a filling or weft face twill. And if it goes under more number of warp yarns and over less number of warp yarns, then you find more number of warp yarns being present on the surface, and thus it becomes warp face twill weave. So, warp face twill weave or filling face twill weave cannot reverse them because they have the right and wrong sides. So, the warp face twill weave, when you reverse it, you find that there are weft floats, and if a weft face twill weave is taken, if you reverse it, you will find that there are warp faced diagonal lines which are present. Thus, you can bring lot of variations like this. Also, sometimes we can change the colors, like in a denim you find, and the warp is always colored and the weft is always white. So, the denim is the best example for this kind of variations in twill weave. Fabrics that are available in twill weave and even twills, you find serge, surah, flannel, and warp face twills, gabardine, denim, jeans cloth, khaki and drill. And one of the popular variations in twill weave is the herringbone. In this, the direction of the twill is changed, it is reversed. So, it goes maybe from left top to right bottom little bit towards this one, it progresses, and then suddenly it reverses at one point and takes up the other way. That means that it goes from the left bottom to the right top. Thus, zigzag or V-shaped patterns are possible in this, and it has a very interesting surface, and thus you find that these materials are available mostly for suiting materials and other things. This also sometimes we call twill weave with different names. It depends upon how many number of harnesses that are being used. We said that there are at least minimum of 3 harnesses are required for making the twill weave. But sometimes when we are going over 2, under 2 and all, maybe 4 harnesses are required, and maybe it is going under 2, over 3, then we need 5 harnesses. In that way, it is called as 3 shaft twill weave or 5 shaft twill weave, or sometimes even 4 shaft twill weave. So, shaft is a term used for the harness, and thus it can be called in that way also. So, twill weave is one of the strongest weaves, and whenever strength is required and the fabrics are being made in twill weave. Satin weave and its variations, and this is a third basic weave, and which is valued for its luster and smoothness. The mode of interlacement is similar to twill weave, but the making of these veils, that means the diagonal lines are purposely interrupted at the point of interlacements. And here in the satin weave, the first weft yarn goes over the first warp yarn, and then under 5 or more number of warp yarns, and then over the next warp yarn, and again under 5 or more number of warp yarns, and so on. And thus the formation of the diagonal lines are purposely interrupted here. There are fewer interlacement when compared to the plain weave or also twill weave, and this is only for the purpose of producing more luster and smoothness in satin fabrics. When you take the characteristics of these satin fabrics, we have already said that they are characterized by having good luster and also smoothness, and here filaments are being used, and so filaments are usually having good luster when compared to the spun yarns, and so filament yarns are being used in the satin fabrics. And this long floats and less interlacements in this particular weave will be able to contribute, for more number of threads being packed in this, and so higher thread count in this satin fabrics are possible when compared to other fabrics, even more than the twill weave fabrics. And satin fabrics have wrong and right sides, and also, but there is no up and down for these fabrics. But the high thread count in this fabric contributes to more durability, more strength, and then giving body, firmness, and also repellency for water and other things. And also the fewer interlacements will also be helpful in having pliability in these fabrics. And then low count fabrics are not that durable. When the thread count is less, the fabrics are going to be less smooth and less lustrous. All satins, irrespective of the number of threads that are present, they slip at the seams and all, and so while making the garments from these fabrics, and much care is taken, and making the seams sealed, and so that it will not slip at this particular point, and thus the fabrics can be durable. Many variations in satin fabrics are also possible. When the floats are formed by the warp yarns, and also if they are made out of filament yarns, and there is more luster and also more smoothness for the satin fabric. But if the fabric is made out of weft floats, not the warp floats, then you find that the fabric is not that smooth and also not that lustrous. And also by varying by taking the filamentous yarns or the spun yarns, then also we can vary the fabrics. Usually the fabrics with filling floats are called as satin fabrics. This is supposed to be one of the variations in satin, and if the warp floats are present, it is called as the satin fabric. But when we take the spun yarns like cotton, you find you cannot have filaments in this, and so in these fabrics the spun yarns are present. Even though there are warp floats in cotton, that means that basically it is a spun yarn, and it is termed as only satin fabrics. So satin fabrics, again we can find the variation. The filling floats of the filament yarns, the fabrics are called as satin. Satin fabrics are also with the warp floats are made out of the spun yarns. So both when we called as the satin fabrics are not that lustrous and not very smooth, and so they can be printed also in case of cotton, and like chintz and all we get with a sheen on that, and in order to improve the sheen, sometimes they are calendared and also sometimes they are shrinerized. That means these are the finishes that improves the luster of the fabric, so that they can be sold like satins in the market. The fabrics in satin weave or rayon satin is present, silk satins are present, and damask fabrics, and also cotton satin fabrics, cotton chintz and all, they are all available in the market, and but few satin materials are only present, and these are all wound on the bolts. They are not available in the form of ordinary flat materials, they are wound on the bolts not to wrinkle these fabrics for use. Then we have seen how the interlacement is there in all the three fundamental weaves. Now when you take all other materials which are having some fancy type of ornamentation on the surface, maybe having a figured effects, all these fabrics are having one of these definitely basic weave construction in them. So without the basic construction, you cannot produce any figured weaves or ornamentation that are possible on this. And so even if it is a jacquard weave having all over design, or it may be a Dobby designs with small designs with having only the borders and only small booties, and all that is possible only with the one of the fundamental weave being the background weave for all these materials. And so, knowing about the fundamental weaves is very, very important, but for them, we cannot do it on a simple loom like this, because for making the fundamental looms we use only a simple loom. But when we want to carry out those the weaving of those fabrics which are very ornamental, which are very elaborate, and we need to actually take up the elaborate attachments to the loom, or sometimes the loom is entirely different, like jacquard looms, wherein all the warp yarns are taken as a single and then they can be operated. Thus, the fundamental weaves are very, very important for any student to learn the weaving.